Hi everyone, it's Miss Akbari from the library here to talk with you about a few different books today. Most of the time when you come to the library, you come from your English classes, and we have a lot of books that relate to topics that we talk about in English, but we have a lot of books that relate to our history and science and even math classes. And so I wanted to tell you about a few of those books today. The first book that I wanted to talk about um, relates to history. And if you enjoy the topics in your history classes, there are a lot of books in the library that would be interesting to you. We have nonfiction books about historical figures and events. We also have historical fiction, which is really fun as far as a type of book to read. In historical fiction, the time period and historical event details are historically accurate, but usually the story that is being told or the main character is made up. And that's what's happening in this book, Chains by Laurie Halls Anderson. In this book, it's set right before the Revolutionary War begins, so in May of 1776. And the main character, Isabel, is a slave living on the east coast of the colonies. And she has, even though she's a slave, she has a pretty good master who's very kind to her. She even gets to learn how to read. And Isabel is going to be freed when her master dies. Unfortunately, when her master or owner passes away, that person's family takes Isabel and her younger sister, and instead of freeing them, they sell them to another family in New York City. And not only is Isabel still a slave, which wasn't supposed to happen, her new masters are very cruel. They're making her work extremely hard. She's beaten on a regular basis, so she's very unhappy. While Isabel is in New York City, she meets a fellow slave. His name is Curzon, and he has ties to the Patriot movement. And Curzon gradually convinces Isabel that she needs to become a spy. She needs to spy on the family that she's living with and working for because they're British sympathizers. And so the Patriots, what will be the revolutionaries, need her information and her support. So it's a really fascinating way to look at the revolution. So that's a time period I thought I knew a lot about, but I had never really considered it from a teenage slave perspective, especially one living in a British sympathizer's house. The next book I wanted to talk with you about kind of occurred to me when I was working and visiting, I guess, some eighth grade science classes. So I heard you guys talking about common ancestors and talking about fossils and evolution. And we have this book in the library that talks about all those things. It's called The Mystery of Life. And what I love about this book, it's a nonfiction book, so the information contained in it is true. It tracks the course of evolution from the very beginning of the universe through Darwin up until now, and really does a great job of sort of breaking down those big concepts and making them something that we can understand. And so sometimes when we learn something like that in science class, we learn very specific things. It's kind of fun to kind of come back out and learn sort of the whole timeline from beginning of the universe till today. What's also great is the author of this book has a really engaging style, and there are lots of facts, but also lots of really funny pictures and funny information, a funny way of thinking about these types of topics. So if you enjoyed learning about evolution in your science class, this might be a good book for you to kind of think about. Speaking of science and history, here's another great title from our nonfiction section. It's called Bomb. And there's a lot of concepts in both the areas of history and science that this book talks about. So this book talks about World War II history. It also talks about the science of nuclear energy. So there's a lot of really great information in this book. And you may already know that in 1945, the United States created an atomic bomb and actually dropped two of those on Japan. And that's what helped us finish or end World War II. But I'm guessing you might not know that not only was the United States working on a nuclear bomb, but Nazi Germany was, and so was the Soviet Union. And that was something I didn't know before reading this book. The story of Bomb is the story of those three governments. There are many famous scientists, and there are actually spies that were looking to steal secrets for various countries. So this book reads a lot like almost a movie script. There's so much happening. The other thing that happens in this book that's really great is there are some people I already knew about. So I know it's a little hard to see, but this is a picture of Franklin Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States at the time. There's a picture of Albert Einstein, and he was a great scientist that a lot of us have probably heard about. But there are also spies for the Soviets that were living in the United States and freedom fighters in Europe that were attacking Nazi science labs to try to make a difference in this story. So this is, like I said, a great nonfiction book, but it almost reads like an action and spy novel. The last book I wanted to talk with you about today is something that a lot of us can probably relate to because we've learned about Rome, ancient Rome, in Eastern Civ. And this book is from our historical fiction section, but it also has some fantasy elements, which is really interesting. So, historical fiction, the details about ancient Rome are accurate. It talks about how ancient Romans had slaves. It talks about gladiator contests in the arena. It talks about the politicians that were looking to overthrow the emperor. So there's a lot of good information there. But this book also has a lot of mythical creatures and magic happening, which I really love as well. So in this book, the main character, Nick, is a teenager. He's a slave in the mines outside of Rome. And as part of being a slave, he's forced to enter this cave. And this cave is supposed to contain a bunch of riches, a bunch of gold and jewelry from Julius Caesar. And what Nick finds that he doesn't expect is this ancient amulet or necklace. And you can see it on the cover art of the book. And this amulet contains this very powerful magic. And when Nick takes it, he suddenly has all this power that he didn't have before, which is something that a Roman slave normally wouldn't have. Unfortunately for Nick, he's not the only one that knows about the power of this amulet. There are some politicians who know about it and will do just about anything to get it away from him. So as I was reading this book, I was amazed at the kinds of adventure that was happening in this book. I was wondering what was going to happen to Nick. Would he survive? Is he ever going to live his life as a free person? Is this going to be enough for him to get citizenship in Rome? A lot of really interesting things. All right, so just a reminder, here's the 4 books that we looked at: Chains, The Mystery of Life, Bomb, and Mark of the Thief. And these books kind of focused on science and social studies topics that we might already know about. We have a lot of other great nonfiction and historical fiction books that would relate to all of these topics. So if any of these 4 books sound interesting to you, you can come check them out in our library. We also have a lot of things that are related to that as well, and we'd love to help you find something great to read. Happy reading!